I remember that afternoon like it was yesterday. The sun was bright, and the FDR drive had turned into a parking lot. I sat in the back of a cab, holding a pair of baby shoes I had found after visiting 3 different stores at Hudson Yards. In soft leather, off-white size 2, in small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. The saleswoman asked if I was having a boy or a girl. I told her I did not know yet. My wife, Claire, wanted to wait until the birth. She called it our last beautiful surprise. I smiled and paid, believing I was the luckiest man in all of New York City. My name is Ethan, 32 years old, an attending surgeon in general surgery at New York Presbyterian. My salary was good. I owned a 2-bedroom condo on the Upper West Side. I had been married for 4 years, and my wife was 6 months pregnant. Everyone I knew told me the same thing. They said, "Ethan, you have it all." I believed them. That day was a Friday. I had swapped my shifts so I could take the weekend off. Cancelled 2 elective surgeries and moved them to the following Wednesday, all so I could spend time with Claire. Her morning sickness had finally passed, and she had been craving the mango sticky rice from that Thai place in Williamsburg. My plan was simple. Pick up the shoes, grab the sticky rice, then go home and promise her a lazy Saturday morning so we could finish putting together the nursery before the baby arrived. My phone buzzed in a group message from the department. Swiped it open without thinking, and that was when I saw the other notification. It was pushed to the top of my screen and sliced through everything else. "Mrs. Claire, your scheduled induction of labor procedure for June 24th has been confirmed. Please arrive at 9 a. In fasting. Bring your ID and your spouse's signature page." The preview cut off there. I stared at those words, and my mind went completely blank. It felt like someone had poured ice water directly into my skull, and the cold spread through my entire body 1 inch at a time. Induction procedure, June 24th. That was exactly 6 months into the pregnancy, my child's pregnancy. The cab was stuck in traffic on the FDR for 7 full minutes. Did not move a muscle. I let the screen go dark, then I pressed it again, reading the notification over and over. The sender was an automated number from Mount Sinai West Obstetrics and Gynecology. There was no mistake. That was where Claire had her prenatal records. The deposit for the VIP delivery room had come from my own bank account. She had scheduled an induction. Why had she not told me? Was there something wrong with the baby? Those 4 days were a kind of torture I cannot fully describe. On Monday, I scrubbed in for 3 surgeries, a laparoscopic cholecystectomy and 2 appendectomies. None of them were major, but my hand stayed absolutely steady through every single one. A surgeon's hands are forged over years in the operating room. My old mentor used to say that my hands were worth a fortune, that they would not tremble no matter how badly my emotions shattered. He was right. By day, I cut disease out of other people's bodies. By night, I climbed into bed next to my wife, her round belly pressed against my lower back through the thin fabric of her nightgown. The baby moved inside her in waves, small fists tapping against my spine. Lay there with my eyes wide open until the sun came up. On Tuesday night, Claire said her legs were badly swollen. I filled a basin with warm water and helped her soak her feet. I knelt on the floor and massaged her calves with slow, steady circles. She was draped across the sofa, scrolling through her phone. The screen was still always facing down. Every so often she would flip it over, glance at a message, type something back, and then place it face down again. Kept my head down and rubbed her swollen ankles. The only thing in my mind was tomorrow. She would walk into that operating suite and take my child from me. And she believed I knew nothing at all. Looked up at her face. Claire was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. Pregnancy had only made her skin brighter. It had that fresh pink glow, like the inside of a seashell. At that moment, her eyes were lowered to her phone, and a faint, private smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. I could not see what she was looking at. Did not know who she was talking to. That smile turned my stomach. "Honey," she said, without looking up. "You have surgeries tomorrow, right?" Just one in the morning, I said, in a laparoscopic total gastrectomy. It will probably take 4 or 5 hours. Okay. That was it. One syllable. Okay. She dropped her eyes back to her phone, and her face was so calm she could have been discussing the weather. I lowered my gaze and kept massaging her feet. My fingers pressed gently on her acupressure points, rotating in steady, clockwise circles. She let out a soft, comfortable sigh and sank deeper into the cushions. Ethan.
Yes?
You are so good to me. I smiled. You are my wife. Who else would I be good to? Claire did not say anything else. Neither did I. Wednesday, June 24th. I woke up at 7 a.m. and followed my usual routine. Shave, button-down shirt. Claire was still in bed, curled on her side with the duvet pulled up to her chin. In half, her face was buried in the pillow, and her hair fanned out across the white sheets. I watched her from the mirror. Her eyes were closed. Her lashes were perfectly still. Babe, I'm heading out. She murmured without opening her eyes. Drive safe. What are you doing today? Nothing. My legs are still swollen. I am staying in. I stood in the doorway and looked at her for 3 full seconds. The morning light slipped through the gap in the curtains and fell across her face. She looked peaceful. She looked like a painting. Turned and walked out. The elevator doors closed. I did not press the button for the parking garage. Pressed the button for the lobby, walked out the front entrance, and stepped into the 24-hour bodega on the corner of our block. I bought a bottle of water and a pack of cigarettes. Then I stood behind the newspaper stand on the corner and fixed my eyes on our building's front door. 42 minutes passed. At 8 minutes past 8, Claire walked out. She was wearing a loose maternity dress and flat shoes. A small crossbody bag was slung across her chest. Her hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, and she had put on light makeup. She paused at the curb, glanced down at her phone, and then hailed a cab. She climbed in carefully. One hand protected her belly, and the other braced against the car door as she lowered herself slowly into the seat. That gesture crushed something inside my chest. She was still shielding the baby. She knew exactly how to protect the baby, and she was on her way to end its life. I flagged down another cab. Follow that car. Do not get too close. The driver was a woman in her 40s. She glanced at me in the rearview mirror, said nothing, and stepped on the gas. Morning rush hour in New York is a battlefield. Both cars crawled through the traffic in slow motion. Through the rear window of the cab ahead, I could see the blurred shape of Claire's silhouette. Her head was resting against the window, and I had no idea what she was thinking. 40 minutes later, the cab pulled up in front of Mount Sinai West. Claire got out. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the hospital sign. Then she lowered her head and walked inside. She did not walk fast, but her steps were steady. There was no hesitation in them at all. A woman 6 months pregnant, walking into a hospital capable of performing a late-term induction, and she did not pause once. I followed. Kept about 30 yards behind her. The lobby was busy. Nobody paid attention to a man in a dress shirt and tie trailing a pregnant woman. Claire took the elevator to the 3rd floor, the obstetrics and gynecology unit. I followed her up and watched her walk directly into the procedure scheduling office. The door did not close all the way. Through the narrow gap, I saw her sit down across from a desk. A stack of documents was placed in front of her. The nurse handed her a pen. Claire took it. She did not flip through the pages. She did not read a single line. She signed her name on the last page. Claire, she wrote it smoothly. Knew her signature by heart. It was on our marriage license. It was on our mortgage. It was on 1,000 shared bills and receipts. Now she was signing it like she was approving a grocery delivery. The nurse slid another sheet across the desk. The spousal consent form requires your husband's signature. He is out of town, Claire said. Her voice was level and even. I have already spoken with the attending physician. These are exceptional circumstances. I can sign on my own authority. The nurse hesitated. Ma'am, this is a high-risk procedure. The legal requirement is that we have both parties. I understand the risks, Claire interrupted. I assume full personal responsibility. If any complication arises, I will hold the hospital harmless. I am prepared to sign a waiver to that effect right now." The nurse was silent for a few seconds. Then she handed Claire another form. Claire took it and began writing again. I stood outside the door with my hands buried in my pockets. My right hand was clamped around my phone. In there was something else in that same pocket. In a small digital voice recorder. Inni had ordered it with overnight shipping on Tuesday evening, and it had arrived yesterday afternoon. The memory card inside it was still blank. It would not stay blank for long. Claire finished signing every document. She stood up and accepted a set of hospital scrubs from the nurse. She turned toward the pre-op holding area. She walked a few steps and then she stopped. Something made her pause, like she had sensed a presence. She turned her head and looked toward the door. Inni stepped sideways behind the wall. In a few seconds later, I heard her footsteps resume. They moved deeper into the corridor, growing fainter. Inni stepped out from behind the wall and watched her silhouette disappear behind the frosted glass doors of the surgical suite. The glass was opaque. Inni could see blurred figures moving inside, but could not tell who was who. The nurse inside the scheduling office had not yet left. Inni pushed the door open and walked in. She looked up and froze. "Dr. Ethan." I did not answer. Inni walked to her desk and picked up the stack of documents Claire had just signed. The first page, informed consent for induction of labor procedure. The second page, application for termination of pregnancy. The third page was the surgical risk disclosure, in line after line of densely packed medical jargon. Every word was familiar to me. Major hemorrhage, uterine perforation, sepsis, amniotic fluid embolism, secondary infertility, death. Inni read down the list, all the way to the bottom of the final page, where a single signature sat above the date line. Claire. Next to it was today's date, June 24th. Today. She signed the liability waiver, the nurse said. Her voice was trembling. "Ethan, we had no idea she had not discussed this with you. Where is she now?" "She just went into the pre-op changing room. Once she changes into the scrubs, she will be taken straight into the OR." I did not wait for the nurse to finish. Inni turned and ran out of the scheduling office. The pre-op area was at the end of the hall. The entrance was a set of automatic sliding doors with a security keypad next to a call button. Inni did not know the access code for Mount Sinai's OB unit. Inni slammed the call button with the heel of my hand. A nurse opened the door. "Sir, may I help you?" I pushed past her and strode directly into the restricted area. "Sir, you cannot go in there. This is a sterile surgical zone." I did not respond. My dress shoes hammered against the rubber floor. The corridor was lined with doors on both sides. Waiting bays. Pre-op bays. Every door was closed. Inni shoved them open one by one. The first bay was empty. The second was empty. The third, Claire was standing inside. She had already changed into the blue and white hospital scrubs. Her hair was tucked into a disposable surgical cap, and she was barefoot on the cold floor. She was just about to sit down in the wheelchair that would take her through the final set of doors into the operating room. The moment she saw me, her face made an expression I will never forget. It was not shock. It was not guilt. It was not fear. It was irritation. She frowned. It was the exact same frown she gave me on the sofa when I interrupted one of her afternoon naps. "You came," she said. Not, "How did you get here?" Not, "What are you doing here?" Just, "You came." It was as if she had known I would find out all along. She simply had not expected me to get here so fast. Inni stood in the doorway with one hand braced against the frame. My knuckles were white. 3 nurses and a security guard crowded into the hallway behind me, shouting at me to leave. Claire sat there next to the wheelchair, watching the chaos. Then she spoke. "Let him in." Everyone fell silent. Claire turned to face me. Her pregnant belly strained against the loose fabric of the surgical scrubs. One hand rested on top of it. The other hand hung at her side, and her tone was as casual as if she were asking me what I wanted for dinner. "Ethan, come inside." Shut the door. The security guard looked at her, then at me. He hesitated for a few seconds. Then he let go of my arm. Inni stepped into the pre-op bay and pulled the door closed behind me. Now it was just the two of us, and the baby still moving inside her. 6 months along. My child. Claire looked at me. Her eyes were calm. They were as flat and lifeless as a frozen pond. "I was not planning on you finding out," she said. "But now that you are here, I will be direct." She paused. "I am not keeping this baby." The room was silent. I could hear the fluorescent lights humming above us. The June sun was blazing outside the window. It lit up her face. It lit up the hand resting on her belly. It lit up the diamond ring on her finger. In the ring I had put there when I dropped to one knee and asked her to marry me. I stared into her eyes and spoke each word separately. "Give me one reason?" Claire looked down at her belly. Then she smiled. It was not a bitter smile. It was not a self-mocking smile. It was a genuine smile, a smile with a trace of real sweetness in it. She lifted her head and met my eye. "Noah wants a child of his own." The fluorescent lights hummed, and inside my pocket, the red light on the voice recorder glowed in silence. The fluorescent lights in the pre-op bay buzzed like a hive of bees had crawled inside my skull. After Claire said those words, she just looked at me. Her expression was calm. She could have been reciting a weather report. One hand rested on her swollen belly. The other hand hung at her side. The diamond on her ring finger caught the light and threw it back at me. "Noah wants a child of his own." I heard my own voice scrape out of my throat. It was dry and rough, like sandpaper dragged across rusted metal. "What did you just say?" "You heard me clearly," Claire said. Innie had heard her. I had heard every single word with absolute clarity. The words hit with the precision of a scalpel parting skin, clean incision, in exact depth. But my brain refused to process the information. It was like a computer throwing up a screen full of garbled code. Every program had frozen. The only thing left was the cursor blinking on and off. In Noah, in a child of his own. She was telling me the baby inside her was not mine. "How long?" I asked. Claire tilted her head slightly, as if she were working out a piece of mental math she did not consider particularly important. "He reached out the day he flew back. So it must have been mid-January. Mid-January. Innie remembered that day. A snowstorm had buried the city. Claire told me an old friend from graduate school was visiting from out of town. She said they were going to grab dinner and she would be back late. Innie was scheduled for an overnight shift. That morning, I had warmed a cup of milk for her before I left. She was curled up on the couch in my sweater, scrolling through her phone. She did not even look up when I said goodbye. That day was January 15th. "So the baby is Noah's," she cut me off. Her voice was clipped and fast. She sounded impatient, like she was explaining something obvious for the second time and resented having to repeat herself. "It has always been his, from the very beginning. From the very beginning. For 6 months. From the day I took her to her first prenatal appointment. From every time I held her hand outside the ultrasound room. From every evening she looked at me and said the baby kicked. This child had never been mine." I leaned against the door, the back of my skull pressed into the cold wood. My knees felt loose, but I stayed upright. The instincts of a surgeon gave me that much. It was like losing a patient on the table. Your adrenaline spikes. Your body wants to collapse. But your hands stay absolutely still, because if they shake, the patient is gone forever. Except this time, the patient was me. "Did you come here today hoping I would watch you take him?" I asked. "No," Claire said. "You told me you had a surgery this morning." "I thought you would be at your own hospital." I spoke to the nurse. "You scheduled this induction last Tuesday. You were planning to keep me in the dark the entire time. You were going to walk in here alone, go through with the procedure, and come home and tell me we lost the baby." Claire did not deny any of it. She did not even look guilty. She sat there on the edge of the wheelchair, the blue and white hospital scrubs hanging loose around her frame. The curve of her 6-month belly pressed against the thin fabric. Her hands were folded on top of it, and her fingertips tapped against her stomach in an absent rhythm. I had seen that gesture 1,000 times. She always tapped her fingers like that when she was thinking. On the table, on the steering wheel, on my shoulder. Now she was tapping them on the baby inside her. "Why?" I asked. Claire looked up at me. "You will have to be more specific." Why Noah, or why not keep the baby? Both. She was quiet for a few seconds, then she made a decision. She took a deep breath and planted her bare feet flat on the cold floor. She straightened her spine. Noah contacted me after he came back, she said. He told me he had spent the last few years thinking things through and realized he had made a mistake. Leaving me was the biggest mistake of his life. He said he had always put his career ahead of me back then, and he wanted to make up for it now. The corner of her mouth lifted again as she spoke, that faint, unbearable smile. He said he wanted to start over with me. You are married. I am aware of that. You are pregnant. He is aware of that. And he told you to terminate the pregnancy. Claire shook her head. He never told me to do anything. The decision was entirely my own. She said it with a trace of pride in her voice. She wanted me to understand that this was her choice. She was not passive in this relationship. She was not being pushed around or manipulated. She was the one who made every decision, actively, with clear eyes. Ethan, I was with Noah for 7 years, she said. From 18 to 25, the 7 best years of my life belonged to him. Then he left, and you showed up. You were so good to me. You treated me so well that I convinced myself I could make a life with you. But you never did. She said it so softly, and every word landed like a mallet, striking the side of my skull. Claire looked at me. For just a split second, something flickered in her eyes. It might have been pity. It might have been impatience. She dropped her gaze to her belly and stopped tapping her fingers. She spread her palm flat across it instead. This baby is Noah's, she said. I want to give him a child. Just not this one. What does that mean? Noah just got back. He is building his career. You know how competitive cardiology is? He needs a wife who can fully support him, not a pregnant liability dragging him down. Claire said this as if it were the most logical reasoning in the world. And I do not want this baby born under another man's name. Once you and I are divorced and I am married to Noah, we will have our own children, she said, another man while looking directly at me. My child. In Noah's child. In her words, I was another man. I laughed. It was not the kind of laugh that comes from finding something funny. It was the kind of laugh your body produces when the collapse is so total that the only reflex left is laughter instead of screaming. The sound bounced off the walls of the pre-op bay, muffled and hollow. So you are going to terminate this baby, divorce me, marry Noah, and give him brand new children. I listed each point like I was running through a pre-op verification checklist. Does he know you are here today? He knows, Claire said. He wanted to come with me. I told him not to. This is my mess. I will clean it up myself. Clean it up. Terminate a 6-month pregnancy. In their 5-year marriage. Dispose of me. I had my lawyer draft the agreement. Claire said. She bent down and pulled a manila envelope from her small bag. She held it out to me. The condo is yours. The savings are yours. The car is yours. I'm walking away with nothing. All I want is a clean break. I did not take it. The envelope hung in the air between us. Her fingers held the edge perfectly steady. You want nothing? I asked. Nothing. Why? Because I owe you, Claire said. And her tone was flat, like she was settling a tab she had already calculated down to the last cent. You were good to me, Ethan. In 5 years, you never once treated me poorly. I am the one who did this. Take the assets as compensation. Compensation. In a condo on the Upper West Side. In a car. Our savings. She was offering me these things to buy out 5 years of my love. 6 months of my hope. In a child she had conceived with someone else. You have thought this through, I said. I always think things through. The fluorescent lights hummed for another stretch. I reached out and took the envelope. Did not open it. Did not read any of the terms inside. I just held it in my hand. The paper felt rough and real against my fingers. I need time to think about this, I said. Fine, Claire said, but the procedure today. You are not doing it today. Ethan, I said, you are not doing it today. I straightened up and pushed away from the door. I took 2 steps forward. Claire flinched back against the wheelchair. The metal frame let out a sharp squeak. I stood above her. She had to tilt her head up to meet my eyes. In a few strands of hair had escaped her surgical cap and clung to her damp forehead. Her eyes were bright and still, frozen over. Sign the papers. Finalize the divorce. After that, you can do whatever you want, I said. My voice was low enough that only she could hear it. But until the divorce is finalized, that baby inside you is still legally mine. If you walk through those operating room doors today, I will call the police. Claire's eyes narrowed. You would not dare. Try me. We held each other's gaze for maybe 10 seconds. The pre-op bay was so silent I could hear the fetal heart monitor thumping from somewhere down the hall. The sound was steady and strong. It was a tiny fist knocking on a closed door. Claire looked away first. Fine, she said. I will wait for your signature. But I suggest you move quickly. The later the term, the higher the risk. You know that better than I do. She stood up from the wheelchair. She picked up the stack of surgical consent forms, tore them in half, and dropped the pieces into the trash. Then she started undoing the buttons of her hospital scrubs. Her movements were unhurried and natural. She looked like a woman whose doctor had simply changed his mind at the last minute and told her to go home and wait. Inai turned and walked out of the pre-op bay. The security guard and the nurses were still clustered in the hallway. When they saw me, they all stepped back in unison. Inai gave them a nod. Ini even managed a professional smile. Everything is fine, I said. I'm taking my wife home. I stalled the divorce for 2 full weeks. During those 2 weeks, I did 3 things. The first thing I did was inventory everything of value in our home. Bank statements, the deed to the condo, the car title, every investment account. Ini copied every document and uploaded it all to a secure cloud server. Inai was not trying to steal her assets. Inai was making sure that once she signed the papers, there would be no way for her to reverse course. The second thing I did was find a lawyer. Her name was Madeline. She was in her early 30s, not tall, with a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and a voice that moved fast. Her mind moved even faster. Inai had found her by scrolling through a list of faces on a law firm website. What made me stop was her profile summary. Columbia Law School, 8 years specializing in matrimonial and family law, with a case record showing a 93% success rate. At our first meeting, I sat across from her desk and laid out the situation in broad strokes, in no emotion, in no confessionals. Inai delivered the facts like a pre-op case presentation. The patient is female, 32, 6 months pregnant, engaged in an extramarital affair with a former partner. The fetus is not the spouse's biological child. The patient has requested a divorce and intends to terminate the pregnancy. Madeline listened and pushed her glasses up her nose. Mr. Ithan, she said, I need you to be completely clear with me. What is the outcome you actually want? I want her to pay, I said. Pay what? What currency? Not money. She is willing to walk away with nothing, which means she either has her own resources or Noah has his. Taking her assets will not hurt her. Madeline leaned back in her chair and spun a pen between her fingers. So what will hurt her? Whatever she cares about most. The pen stopped spinning. She cares most about Noah, I said. So I am going to make the thing she cares about destroy her. Madeleine was quiet for a few seconds. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad, and flipped open the cover. Start talking, she said. Every detail. From the first day you knew. Do not leave anything out. I told her everything. The appointment notification, the chase through the hospital, the confrontation in the pre-op bay, the things Claire had said, the things I knew about Noah. Ini also told her that I was certain there were more conversations, more plans, more pieces of this conspiracy that I had not yet heard. Inai needed to dig them out. Madeline filled 2 pages with dense shorthand notes. At the end, she circled a single word and drew an arrow next to it. Evidence. Have you signed the divorce agreement yet? She asked. No, do not sign it. At least not yet. Madeline set her pen down. The moment you sign those papers, your legal relationship to her is severed. After that, any attempt to gather further evidence will be blocked by privacy rights. Right now, you are still her husband. You have the legal right to know what she has done during the marriage. She looked up at me. Do you have anywhere in your home where you could conceal a recording device?
Yes, I said.
Legally speaking, audio recorded by one spouse inside the shared marital residence, provided it is not obtained for an unlawful purpose, can be admitted as evidence in civil proceedings. Madeline's voice was clinical. If a criminal case is involved, its admissibility broadens. What kind of criminal case? Abandonment, bigamy. Those are the lighter charges. But if Noah's language in those recordings demonstrates that he actively incited the termination, and if his actions go beyond simple encouragement into the territory of substantial push or pressure, she paused. What? I asked. If he knew the child was his and still pushed Claire to terminate the pregnancy, and if his words cross a certain threshold, we could be looking at criminal solicitation of murder. The office was very quiet. The air conditioning hummed through the vents, stirring the leaves of a potted plant on the windowsill. Mr. Then, Madeline said. Her eyes behind the glasses were sharp and professional, but there was no cold distance in them. This road will be long, and it will get very dirty. Are you sure you want to walk it?
My child is already gone, I said.
A little dirt does not scare me. The third thing I did was buy a voice recorder. Not one of those cheap units you find online. This was professional grade, 320 hours of battery life, noise-cancelling microphone, disguised as an external power adapter that plugged directly into a wall outlet. It could run 24 hours a day without stopping. Inai plugged it into the socket next to the bed in the master bedroom. The pickup range covered the entire bedroom and the walk-in closet next to it. Those were the two places where Claire took her phone calls most often. Then I waited. The divorce agreement stayed unsigned. Claire asked about it 3 times. The first time was over text. She was polite. The second time was a phone call. I could hear the irritation creeping into her voice. The third time was at the dinner table. That night, I made 4 dishes and a soup, all her favorites. Shrimp stir-fry, in-braised short ribs, garlic baby bok choy, vermicelli with scallops. The soup was tomato brisket. Claire sat across from me, poking at her plate with her chopsticks. She barely ate. Have you finished looking over the agreement? I have, I said. Innie picked up a piece of short rib. Are there issues? A few clauses need adjusting. Claire frowned. I told you I am walking away with nothing. What is left to adjust? That is exactly why it needs adjusting, I said. Inai set down my chopsticks and looked at her. You are pregnant. Under the law, the husband cannot unilaterally file for divorce while the wife is pregnant. If you walk away with nothing, the judge will suspect I pressured you into giving up your assets. The agreement will be thrown out. It will be a mess. Claire's expression relaxed slightly. She knew I was telling the truth. So what do you want to do? Split the assets evenly, in fair division. Once the divorce is finalized, if you decide you want to return your share to me, that is your own business. She thought it over and nodded. Fine, do it your way. When can I sign? Next week. My lawyer is drafting a new version. Move quickly, she said. Why the rush? I smiled and picked up my chopsticks again. That procedure of yours is not going anywhere. Claire did not say another word. Later that night, after dinner, she went into the bedroom and shut the door. Inai sat on the living room sofa, opened an unremarkable-looking app on my phone, and put in my earbuds. The voice recorder's live monitoring function was now active. Claire's voice came through the earbuds. She was on a call. In her tone was annoyed. He is stalling again. He says the lawyer needs to redraft the agreement with an even split. A man's voice answered on the other end. It was low and carried a note of dismissive arrogance. So let him. In a few more days will not matter. Noah, in my jaw locked. Are you not thinking clearly? Claire lowered her voice, but the urgency sharpened every word. The longer he drags this out, the more suspicious he is going to get. Ethan looks naive, but underneath all that patience he is sharp. If he starts digging and finds out about the baby. What if he does? Noah cut in. Is a judge going to care who you sleep with? I have seen divorce cases. The worst that happens is the at-fault party gets a smaller share of the property. It is not about the property. Claire's voice was edging toward panic. If he proves the baby is yours, I cannot have the induction. Silence on the other end. Why not? Noah asked. Because I will need the father's consent, Claire said. Current law says a married woman needs her spouse's consent to terminate a pregnancy. But if the spouse can prove the baby is not his, then the biological father has to sign off. And so will you sign or not? More silence. Will you sign or not? Claire repeated. How could I possibly sign that? Noah's voice turned cold. If I put my name on that document, I am publicly admitting to adultery with a married woman. The moment that gets out, my career at Cleveland Clinic is over. Do you have any idea what that would do to me? Then we need to move fast, Claire said, before he figures any of this out. Finalize the divorce. Schedule the procedure. Once the baby is gone, there is nothing left for him to prove. In no body, in no evidence. He will have nothing to take to court. I pulled the earbuds out. My hands were trembling. It was not anger. It was because on the screen of the recording app, a red dot was pulsing steadily. Recording in progress. The time counter was running, second by second. Every word, every pause, every shift in tone, all of it was being written onto a memory card the size of my thumbnail. I put the earbuds back in. Noah was speaking. Do you think he suspects anything? Suspects what? That the baby is not his. Claire laughed. It was the same laugh I had heard in the pre-op bay, light and dismissive, brimming with contempt. Impossible, she said. Ethan's biggest flaw is that he trusts me too much. 4 years now, and he believes every word I say. And if that changes, if he actually knew the truth, a man with his temper would have exploded by now. He made me a full dinner spread tonight. Does that sound like a man who just found out his wife is cheating? Noah did not answer. Stop overthinking, Claire said. Her voice softened. It took on a kind of tenderness I had never heard from her before. Not once. Not in 5 years. Once this is behind us, we can start fresh. You said you were going to take me to Palo Alto. Have you finalized things with Stanford? Almost done, Noah said. Visiting scholar. Early spring next year. Then that is it, Claire said. By spring, I will be recovered, and we can try again. Try what? A baby, she said. She laughed again, soft and warm. Your baby. I locked my phone. Pulled out the earbuds. Leaned back into the sofa. The apartment was quiet. The refrigerator compressor hummed from the kitchen. The occasional set of headlights swept across the ceiling and faded. The dishes were still soaking in the sink. The braised short ribs sat half-eaten on the dinner table. Our wedding portrait hung on the wall across from me. In the photo, Claire was in a white dress and I was in a black suit. We were standing in a field of sunflowers. The sun was blazing. She was laughing and leaning against my shoulder, and I was looking down at her, and my eyes were full of light. That was 4 summers ago. Back then, I believed the luckiest thing that had ever happened to me was marrying this woman. And now I knew the luckiest thing that had ever happened to me was the voice recorder I had plugged into my bedroom wall. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Madeline. I have what we need. Her reply came instantly. Is it enough? I typed 4 words. Enough to bury her. Madeline drafted the agreement. She slid it across the conference table to me. 11 pages. In a 4 dense paragraphs in tight legalese. I flipped through a few pages and looked up at her. Are you sure this is not just a trap? Madeline picked up her coffee and took a sip. Every agreement I draft is perfectly legal, Mr. Ethan. Whether the other side falls into a trap depends entirely on how greedy the other side is. She reached over and turned to one of the pages. Her finger landed on Clause 7, subsection 3. The line was buried under the heading Marital Debts. It read, all debts incurred by Party B, Claire, for personal reasons during the existence of the marriage, shall be borne solely by Party B and shall have no relation to Party A, Ethan. She has no debts, I said. She has no debts now. That does not mean she will not have debts in the future. Madeline's tone was utterly neutral. If someone pursues her for civil damages resulting from intentional harm caused to another person, this clause protects your assets from execution. I stared at the line for a long moment. Intentional harm. An unlawful termination of pregnancy can be legally classified as an infringement on the legal rights of the fetus's father, Madeline said. If the biological father is not the spouse, and the spouse was deprived of his reproductive rights without his knowledge or consent, that constitutes a civil injury. And injury means damages. She flipped to the final page and stopped at the compensation clause. "Here," she said. "This is the most important sentence in the entire agreement." I read it. Clause 11, compensation and acknowledgement, tucked into the middle of the paragraph, was a single unremarkable sentence. Party B confirms that the fetus conceived during the marriage shares no biological relationship with Party A, and that Party A had no knowledge of this fact and gave no form of consent whatsoever. "You are making her admit it herself," I said. "Exactly," Madeline said. "Once she signs, she has formally acknowledged the affair and the pregnancy in her own hand. She has also confirmed that you were kept completely in the dark the entire time. Once that factual record is established, it becomes ironclad evidence in any court." She pushed her glasses up. In there was a glint in her eyes. It was the same look a surgeon gets right before making the first incision. The agreement itself is civil, but the facts confirmed inside it can be used in a criminal case. Abandonment, bigamy, intentional infliction of harm. If the chain of evidence is complete, any one of those charges is enough to destroy her, and this agreement is the first link in that chain. I read the entire agreement again from start to finish, 11 pages. Every clause appeared fair, legal, and perfectly ordinary. Assets split down the middle, each party responsible for their own debts, the no-fault party not required to pay any compensation. Claire would never guess how many minds were buried in those bland, reasonable paragraphs. "Are you confident she will sign?" Madeline asked. "She will," I said. "Right now, all she wants is out. The faster, the better. When people are desperate, they do not read the fine print." I was right. Claire took the agreement and spent exactly 40 minutes with it. Indy did not say reading because she was not reading. She was flipping. She turned the pages fast, pausing only briefly on the clauses about asset division. When she reached clause 11, her finger stopped. My heart missed a beat. She stared at the sentence. "Fetus shares no biological relationship with Party A." Her eyes lingered there for several seconds. Then she looked up. "What is this sentence for?" "My lawyer added it. She said it was to protect me from future liability," I said. My voice was casual, like I was explaining a minor billing detail. "If the baby is born and you later claim it is mine and come after me for child support, what then? This sentence makes sure I am not responsible." The tension in Claire's brow melted away. She believed it. She believed it because it fit perfectly into the story she had written in her head. The baby would be gone. In there would be no evidence. She and Noah would vanish to the other side of the country. In her version of the story, I was the trusting fool who had been cheated on and was still thinking about how to save money on child support. It never crossed her mind that I was not thinking about child support at all. Inai was thinking about how to bury her so deep she would never see daylight again. Claire picked up the pen. She signed her name at the bottom of the final page. Claire, the same signature she had written on the surgical consent forms, in smooth and light. Not a trace of hesitation. She handed me the pen. Inai took it. Inai signed my name next to hers, Inthan, 2 syllables. Inai wrote them carefully, deliberately, like letters being carved into a gravestone. "Done," I said. "We can file at the courthouse tomorrow." "Tomorrow is Saturday," Claire said. "Monday."
"Fine."
Monday. She folded her copy of the agreement and slipped it into her bag. Then she stood up and let her eyes travel slowly around the living room. She was saying goodbye to the home we had shared for 4 years. Her gaze moved across the sofa, the coffee table, the TV, and finally settled on the wedding portrait on the wall. "You can deal with that," she said. "I do not want any of it." "All right." She walked to the door, changed into her shoes, and opened it. When the door was halfway open, she turned back. "Ethan." "Yes." "Do you hate me?" I looked at her. The late afternoon sun was streaming through the west window. It lit up her face. Her eyes were still so beautiful, and still so calm, in a frozen pond with nothing visible beneath the ice. "No," I said. She smiled, turned, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her, very softly. Inai sat on the sofa and stared at the wedding portrait on the wall. Inai stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and sent a message to Madeleine. Agreement signed. "What is the next step?" she replied with 2 words. "File charges." Everything moved faster than I expected after the charges were filed. Madeleine sent the audio files to a forensic lab for authentication. She submitted them to the NYPD Midtown Precinct along with the signed divorce agreement. The charge was criminal solicitation of murder. The target was not Claire, it was Noah. Madeleine's logic was precise. The baby inside Claire was Noah's biological child. Noah knew the baby was his. Despite that knowledge, he repeatedly urged Claire to terminate the pregnancy. He applied pressure. He set deadlines. He provided substantial practical assistance. His actions met every statutory threshold for criminal solicitation. Claire herself was named as a co-conspirator who had agreed to carry out the act. Why not have her file the complaint herself? I had asked Madeleine in her office, "Because we are still missing one piece," she said. "What piece?" "Motive." Madeleine set down her coffee. Why did Noah need this baby gone so badly? Because it inconvenienced his career. That is not enough. We need something stronger. That final piece walked in on its own 2 weeks later. The day Claire was summoned to court, the first autumn rain of the season was falling over New York. Inai attended as a witness. Inai sat in the second row of the gallery right next to the aisle. When Claire was escorted in, our eyes met across the well of the courtroom. She was wearing a dark blue blouse. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her complexion looked worse than it had the day she signed the papers. The moment she saw me, her stride faltered. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but the bailiff urged her forward, and she closed her mouth. Noah sat on the other side of the defense table. He wore a white dress shirt and charcoal trousers. His hair was meticulously combed. His face carried the expression of a man who had been unwillingly dragged into a frivolous dispute. In impatience mixed with arrogance, his lawyer sat beside him, leafing through a file and occasionally leaning over to whisper in his ear. The judge struck the gavel. "Order! This court is now in session." The charges were read. The identities were confirmed. The rights and obligations were stated. The standard procedural litany played out. Then the prosecutor rose and began the opening statement. Between January and June of this year, the defendant Noah and the defendant Claire, with full knowledge that Claire was lawfully married, engaged in an ongoing extramarital relationship that resulted in pregnancy. To conceal this fact, the 2 defendants conspired on multiple occasions through phone communications and in-person discussions to arrange for Claire to unilaterally terminate the pregnancy. The defendant Noah played the role of inciter, enforcer, and active facilitator of this plan. The prosecution submits that the defendant's actions meet the statutory definition of criminal solicitation of murder under the New York State Penal Code. Noah's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution's characterization is fundamentally flawed. A fetus is not a legal person, and pregnancy termination does not constitute murder under the law. The prosecution's charge lacks any coherent legal foundation. The defense moves for immediate dismissal." The judge turned to the prosecutor. The prosecutor rose without haste. "The first set of evidence submitted by the prosecution will demonstrate that both defendants possessed the specific intent to end the life of the fetus. The fact that the termination was prevented before completion does not absolve the defendants. It merely renders the offense an incomplete attempt." The prosecution requests permission to play the audio evidence. Permission granted. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. Every gaze in the room turned toward the projection screen at the front. A technician adjusted something for a few seconds. Then an audio file was opened, in static, and then Claire's voice. "He is stalling again. He says the lawyer needs to redraft the agreement with an even split." Someone in the gallery coughed quietly. Then Noah's voice. "So let him. In a few days will not matter." "Claire, are you not thinking clearly? The longer he drags this out, the more suspicious he is going to get." Ethan looks naive, but underneath all that patience he is sharp. "If he starts digging and finds out about the baby, Noah." "What if he does? Is a judge going to care who you sleep with?" I have seen divorce cases. The worst that happens is the at-fault party gets a smaller share of the property. Claire, it is not about the property. If he proves the baby is yours, I cannot have the induction. Noah, why not? Claire, because I will need the father's consent. Current law says a married woman needs her spouse's consent to terminate a pregnancy. But if the spouse can prove the baby is not his, then the biological father has to sign off. So will you sign or not? Noah, how could I possibly sign that? If I put my name on that document, I am publicly admitting to adultery with a married woman. The moment that gets out, my career at Cleveland Clinic is over. Do you have any idea what that would do to me? Claire, then we need to move fast before he figures any of this out. Finalize the divorce. Schedule the procedure. Once the baby is gone, there is nothing left for him to prove. In no body, in no evidence, he will have nothing to take to court. At this point in the recording, someone in the gallery drew a sharp breath. A woman sitting in the row ahead of me turned and looked back. Her eyes were full of shock and something close to pity. Innie did not look at her. I was looking at Claire. Claire's face had gone the color of chalk. Her hands were pressed flat against her knees. Her 10 fingers were knotted together so tightly that the knuckles had turned a bloodless white. Her lips were clamped shut, and her bottom lip had a white crease where her teeth were biting down. The timestamp on this recording is 9:14 p. June 23rd, the prosecutor said. The location is the shared marital residence of the defendant, Claire, and the complainant, Ethan. In this recording, the two defendants explicitly discuss a plan to ensure, and I quote, "The baby is gone. There is nothing left for him to prove." The defendant, Noah, not only fails to dissuade Claire from the termination, but actively urges her to move faster. The recording continued. Noah, do you think he suspects anything? Claire, suspects what? Noah, that the baby is not his. Claire, impossible. Ethan's biggest flaw is that he trusts me too much. 4 years now, and he believes every word I say. Noah, and if that changes? Claire, if that changes, if he actually knew the truth, a man with his temper would have exploded by now. He made me a full dinner spread tonight. Does that sound like a man who just found out his wife is cheating? A rustle of whispers rippled across the gallery. The judge struck the gavel. The gallery will remain silent. Then the final section of the recording played. Claire's voice, soft, so tender it made my molars ache. Once this is behind us, we can start fresh. You said you were going to take me to Palo Alto. Have you finalized things with Stanford? Noah, almost done. Visiting scholar. Early spring next year. Claire, then that is it. By spring, I will be recovered, and we can try again. Noah, try what? Claire, and a baby, your baby. The recording ended. The courtroom was silent for 5 full seconds. The judge removed her glasses and turned toward the defense table. Defendant Noah, do you have anything to say in response to the recording that has just been played? Noah's face, starting from his collar and moving upward, flooded with color. He shot to his feet. The legs of his chair screeched against the floor. It is fake. His voice cracked. This recording is fabricated. I had no idea she was recording anything. I never said those words. This is AI-generated defense counsel. The judge cut him off. The authenticity of the audio evidence will be determined by forensic examination. The court will address this during the evidentiary phase. For now, please take your seat. Noah did not sit. He turned toward Claire. His eyes cut into her like a blade. Are you insane? His voice was low, but the microphone caught every syllable, and every person in the room heard it. You talked to him about this in your own house? Claire's eyes snapped up to meet his. Her lips trembled. Noah, do not say my name. The bailiff stepped forward and pressed Noah back into his chair by the shoulders. He forced himself down. His chest was heaving. His tie had twisted to one side. The veins on his forehead bulged out one by one. Innie sat in the second row of the gallery and watched him lose his composure. I felt no satisfaction at all. I felt only the cold, detached calm of a surgeon closing a wound. The first incision had been made. The bleeding was exactly what I had anticipated. Blood pressure stable, pulse steady. The next cuts had to be just as precise. one after another. My phone buzzed in my pocket. In a message from Madeline. Second recording is ready. We play it the moment he tries to turn on her. I typed back a single word. Good. After the first recording finished playing, the entire atmosphere inside the courtroom changed. The scattered sounds that had filled the gallery all morning. Coughs, the rustle of jackets, the muffled buzz of phones. All of it stopped. What replaced it was a heavy, pressing silence. It was the kind of silence that falls over an operating room when every person in the room sees the monitor flatline and no one wants to be the first to speak. I sat in the second row next to the aisle, my back pressed against the hard wooden bench. My palms were dry. My breathing was even. Claire sat in the defendant's chair. The collar of her dark blue blouse had twisted to one side. She did not fix it. Her eyes were locked onto the back of Noah's head, which was directly across from her at the other end of the defense table. Her lips were slightly parted. It looked like there were words stuck in her throat that she could not force out. Noah did not turn around to look at her. Not once. The judge announced a 15-minute recess. The bailiffs led both defendants out through separate side doors. Claire exited through the left door. Noah exited through the right. In the brief moment when their paths crossed, Claire turned her head and her lips moved. She said his name. Noah did not slow his stride by even half a step. His white shirt disappeared through the doorway without hesitation. I stayed where I was. Madeline stood up from the prosecution side and walked over to sit next to me. She handed me a bottle of water with the cap already loosened. Inni took a drink. It was cold. Noah's lawyer requested a private conference during the recess. Madeline said her voice was low. Her lips barely moved. They are using these 15 minutes to decide on a strategy. What kind of strategy? Self-preservation. Madeline took off her glasses and wiped them on the hem of her blouse. That first recording did catastrophic damage to him. He is not stupid. He just heard the evidence with his own ears, and he knows he is standing at the edge of a cliff. He has two options now. He can insist the recording is fabricated, or he can push the entire blame onto Claire. He cannot push it all. He cannot push it all, but he can reduce his sentence. Madeline put her glasses back on. The eyes behind the lenses were analytical and cool. She was working through a logic problem. An inciter and a principal actor do not receive the same sentence under the law. If he can convince the court that he merely knew about the plan rather than drove it, or even that Claire misled him, the charge could be reduced from solicitation of murder to accessory after the fact. His prison time gets cut by more than half. I set the water bottle on the arm of the bench. Does he have evidence? He is an attending cardiologist at Cleveland Clinic. His IQ is not low. Madeline folded her hands on her knee. If he was bold enough to push Claire toward that operating room over the phone, he was also smart enough to save something for himself. The 15 minutes expired. The gavel came down. Everyone moved back into position. Noah walked in through the right side door. His stride was steadier than before. His tie had been redone. His collar was folded perfectly. He sat down and placed his hands on the table with his fingers interlaced, and his index finger tapped the back of his hand in a steady rhythm. Inni knew that gesture too well. It was the same rhythm a cardiac surgeon keeps while waiting for the bypass machine to cycle. In a habit formed over years in the OR, Claire was brought back in through the left door. She looked like she had shrunk. She was no longer sitting with the rigid, braced posture she had held when the session first opened. Her shoulders had collapsed inward. Her hands were squeezed between her knees, and her fingers were twisting around each other. The judge looked at Noah. Defendant Noah, do you have anything to add in response to the recording that was played before the recess? Noah rose. He stood very straight. His shoulders were squared. His chin was lifted slightly. His voice was not loud, but every word was enunciated with absolute clarity. Your Honor, I admit it. The recording is authentic. A burst of noise erupted from the gallery. The judge banged the gavel twice to force it down. Noah ignored the commotion behind him. He kept speaking. His pace was unhurried. He sounded like a man reading from a statement he had revised many times. However, I must clarify one thing. The decision to terminate the pregnancy was entirely Claire's. From the very beginning, it was her idea. I never incited, urged, or pressured her to do anything. In the recording, when I said let him wait, I was stalling. Innie did not want her to go through with the procedure at all. Claire's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide and locked onto his face. Innoa did not look at her. His gaze stayed fixed somewhere beyond the defense table, aimed at the stack of case files in front of the judge. He looked like an attending physician delivering a difficult case report. Professional, controlled, void of emotion. Your Honor, I request permission to submit a new set of evidence. The judge looked at him.
What evidence?
Text messages between myself and Claire. The record span from February through June of this year, 137 pages in total. These messages will prove 3 facts. First, it was Claire who initiated contact with me, not the other way around. In second, the decision to terminate was proposed and repeatedly pushed by Claire alone. Third, I expressed on multiple occasions that I wanted her to keep the baby. Claire launched herself out of her chair. You are lying. Her voice was so sharp it scraped across every eardrum in the room. The entire gallery flinched backward. The bailiff stepped forward and pressed down on her shoulder. She struggled for a second before being forced back into her seat. Order. The judge's gavel slammed down. Defendant Claire, one more disruption and this court will apply physical restraints. Sit down. Claire sat. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes had gone red at the rims, and she stared at the side of Noah's face like she was trying to burn a hole through it. Noah did not glance at her. His eyeballs did not so much as twitch in her direction. The technician projected Noah's text messages onto the large screen. I read them one by one, and a cold sensation crept down the length of my fingers. The messages were real. But they were not the full truth. Noah was clever. The records he submitted all began in mid-April. That was after Claire had passed the 3-month mark. She was beyond the window for a standard procedure and could only undergo a mid-term induction at that point. In this phase of the correspondence, Noah had indeed sent messages like, "Keep the baby, the procedure is too hard on your body, and please think about this more." What he did not submit were the records from January through March, the messages in which he had repeatedly pressured Claire to get the procedure done as fast as possible. The sooner the better, do not drag this out. Before 3 months, it is just medication. It is not even a real operation. You will not suffer. What are you still hesitating for? He had cherry-picked the half that made him look innocent. He had hidden the other half so deep no one would find it. Claire saw it too. Her mouth opened and closed. She looked like someone whose throat was being squeezed shut. She wanted to fight back, but she had no evidence, and her phone had been seized by law enforcement after the charges were filed. The original chat logs were completely inaccessible to her. Your Honor, Noah's lawyer said, rising. As you can see, my client not only refrained from urging termination, he actively tried to talk the defendant out of it on multiple occasions. The line in the recording about the baby is gone and there is nothing left to prove was Claire's language, not my client's. My client was in a passive position throughout the entire sequence of events. He was pulled along by Claire's emotional demands. You piece of garbage, Claire screamed. The gavel came down again. Defendant Claire, this is your final warning. Claire covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook violently. Her crying leaked out through her fingers. It was muffled and raw. It was the sound of a person pressing her face into a pillow so no one would hear. The entire courtroom listened to her sob. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. This was not the sound of someone feeling sorry for herself. This was the sound of someone realizing she had been thrown away. Noah stood at the defense table. His hands were folded in front of him. His gaze was fixed straight ahead. He did not even furrow his brow. I watched his profile and felt something almost like amusement flicker in my chest. This man was a senior cardiologist at one of the best hospitals in the country. His salary was 7 figures. He had been recruited with a distinguished talent visa. He was the kind of surgeon the papers wrote profiles about. Over his career, the lives he had saved on the operating table would probably fill half the gallery behind me. And now here he was, standing in a courtroom, pushing the woman he had once claimed he could not live without directly under the wheels to save himself. Claire had probably never imagined this. She had thrown away her marriage. She had thrown away her child. She had thrown away a man who had loved her for 5 years. All of it for Noah. And what she got in return was him standing up in open court, in front of every person in this room, and dropping her into the abyss alone. The judge turned to the prosecution. Does the prosecution have any response to the evidence submitted by defendant Noah? The prosecutor rose. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution believes the text messages submitted by defendant Noah show clear signs of selective disclosure. The time range does not match the full scope of the correspondence. The prosecution requests access to the complete chat data stored on defendant Claire's seized mobile device for cross-referencing. Granted, the judge said. In addition, the prosecutor said, pausing for a beat, the prosecution requests permission to play a second audio recording. Noah's lawyer frowned. The prosecution has another recording. Why was this not disclosed during the evidentiary phase? The prosecutor turned to face the judge. This recording covers the full conspiracy between both defendants, including statements made by defendant Noah at an earlier point in time that directly contradict the text messages he has just introduced. Due to the volume and time span of the evidence in this case, the prosecution is presenting the material in chronological order. This is fully consistent with standard trial procedure. The judge nodded. Permission granted. The courtroom lights dimmed a second time. Innie leaned back against the bench and watched the projection screen flicker to life. My phone sat silent in my pocket. Madeleine's earlier message was still on the screen. Second recording is ready. We play it the moment he tries to turn on her. She had known Noah would betray Claire. From the second he opened his mouth and started pushing blame onto her. He had pressed the switch on his own countdown timer, and the second recording was the blade. The technician clicked the audio file open. The courtroom sound system emitted a short burst of static. Then a man's voice filled the room. It was Noah, but he did not sound like the composed attending cardiologist who had just addressed the court. The Noah on this recording was speaking in a low, rapid, pressurized voice. The impatience in it could not be hidden. What is taking you so long? The longer you wait, the further along you get. Do you not understand that the risks multiply with every week you delay? The air in the courtroom seemed to vanish for a single second. Then Claire's voice came through. She was crying. The doctor said before 12 weeks, it is just medication. I am only at 9 weeks now. We still have time. 12 weeks? Noah let out a cold laugh. Do you have any idea how long the waiting list is for a termination before 12 weeks? Your husband is a surgeon at New York Presbyterian. If he decides to pull records and starts asking questions, he will find everything. I'm telling you, you have 2 weeks at most. If you go past 11 weeks, you cannot use the medication. You will have to go on the operating table. But I am scared. Scared of what? Which woman has not had one of these done? There are millions of them every year in this country. Are you more delicate than all of them? Someone in the gallery sucked in a sharp breath. Innie looked at Noah. He was standing at the defense table. The polished composure he had worn like a second skin was cracking. The corner of his mouth twitched. His Adam's apple bobbed once. His tie was pulled too tight, and the veins in his neck were visibly pulsing. The recording kept playing. Claire. The baby is yours. Can you not just... Noah. The baby is mine, so what? Do you really think I want a bastard born out of an affair with a married woman? Bastard. The word detonated inside the courtroom like a grenade. It bounced off the floor. It bounced off the walls. It landed on every person in the room. Claire sat frozen in her chair. Her entire body had gone rigid, as if an electric current had passed through her and locked every muscle in place. Her eyes were stretched wide. Her pupils had shrunk to 2 tiny black dots. Her lips moved soundlessly, repeating the word bastard. He had not said the baby. He had said bastard. This was the same woman who, in the pre-op bay, had used a voice full of sweetness to tell me she wanted to give Noah a child of his own. The same man she had been willing to destroy her life for. And on this recording, in his own voice, he was calling her unborn child. His unborn child. In a bastard. The recording continued. In Noah. Listen to me clearly, Claire. The reason I came back was to get a senior attending position, not to act out some cheap second chance romance with you. I'm letting you come back to me. The condition is that you clean up this mess first. In divorce, procedure, 2 items, finish both, and then come find me. If you cannot finish them, do not come at all. Claire's voice was shaking so badly the words nearly fell apart. Noah, this is not what you said before. You told me you could not let me go. You said, Noah, if I had not said those things, would you have agreed to the procedure? Silence. The only sounds left on the recording were the hum of the electrical current and Claire's stifled sobs. This was not the broken wailing she had let out in the courtroom. This was the sound of a woman sitting alone in a dark apartment, pressing her face into her own palms, trying with everything she had not to make a sound. Then Noah's voice returned. This time it was softer. It was the softness of a surgeon switching from a scalpel to a blunt clamp. The tool had changed. The purpose had not. Claire, he said. He used her private name, the one only people closest to her knew. Think about this clearly. Taking care of this baby now is better for you too. Think about what this child would, your husband's last name, in my blood. How would you raise a child like that? Every single day you would look at his face and see my face looking back at you. Do you think you could handle that? Do you think Ethan could handle that? And sooner or later the truth would come out. By then, you would not be able to get a divorce. You would not be able to give the child away. Your entire life would be destroyed. In a short pain is better than a long one. Get it done while the term is still early. Once this whole thing blows over, once we are married, you can have as many as you want. I will give you as many as you want. Someone in the gallery muttered a curse under their breath. It was a woman's voice. I could not make out the exact words, but the disgust in them needed no translation. A bailiff glanced in that direction but did not act. The recording continued. Claire's voice was hoarse. It was the voice of someone who had been worn down to nothing. Can you at least come with me to the hospital? Noah, how could I possibly come with you? Your husband works at New York Presbyterian. Mount Sinai West is full of people who know him. What do you think happens if someone sees the two of us walking into that operating suite together? My career would be finished. Go alone. Keep it clean. Do not complicate things. And remember, no matter who asks, the baby is your husband's, Claire. And after all this is over, can we really start again? Noah's voice turned so gentle it made my skin crawl. Of course we can. I have already ordered your wedding dress in Palo Alto. We just have to wait for this to pass, just a little longer. It will be over soon. The recording stopped. The courtroom was silent for 3 full seconds. Then the prosecutor rose. His voice was as steady as a pathologist reading out a biopsy report. Your Honor, the timestamp on this recording is 9:40 p. February 17th of this year. The location is, once again, the shared marital residence of the complainant Ethan and the defendant Claire. This recording predates the text message records submitted by defendant Noah by nearly 2 full months. The text messages he submitted begin on April 11th. He paused. In this recording, the defendant Noah not only fails to discourage Claire from terminating the pregnancy, he refers to the fetus with the term bastard. He uses deception to pressure her into moving faster. He dangles the promise of marriage as a tool of emotional manipulation. Every single element of this recording directly contradicts the testimony he just gave to this court. He told you he was in a passive position. He told you Claire pulled him along. He told you he tried to talk her out of it. The prosecutor turned to face Noah. His words came out one at a time. Defendant Noah, you told this court that the decision to terminate was entirely Claire's. And is that correct? Noah did not answer. You told this court that you never incited, urged, or pressured her. And is that correct? Noah still did not answer. His face had gone from red to white, and then to a sickly shade of wax yellow. His lips were pressed into a bloodless line. His chin was trembling. The same hands that were steady as stone inside a patient's open chest were now gripping the edge of the defense table so hard his fingernails had turned white. Claire was staring at him. She was no longer crying. The tears were still wet on her face, but her expression had shifted. The breakdown was gone. Something else had taken its place, something flat and still and terrifyingly calm. She turned her head slowly and fixed her eyes on Noah's face. The corner of her mouth moved. She looked like someone chewing on a word she had only just begun to taste. Bastard. Her voice was not loud, but in the silence of that courtroom, every person heard it. You called him a bastard, she repeated, and her tone was flat. It was a trowel scraping across a bare wall. Noah. You used that word? For my baby. Your baby? A muscle jumped under Noah's eye. Claire. Do not say my name. Claire turned her face away from him. She faced the judge. She lifted her hands off her knees and placed them flat on the table in front of her. Her fingers were still trembling, but her voice had steadied. Your Honor, I am guilty. The gallery erupted. I admit that I planned to terminate the pregnancy on June 24th. I admit that the biological father of the child is Noah. I also admit that in making this decision, I did not inform my lawful spouse, Ethan. She took a breath. But I was not the principal architect from the very first day, from the very first appointment when the pregnancy was confirmed. It was Noah who pushed me to end it. Every phone call on that recording, every text message, every time we met in person, he was pushing. He told me it was for my own good. He told me it was for our future. I believed him. She turned her head and looked at Noah. Her face held no anger, no hatred. Only the residue of someone who had burned every expectation she ever had and was now staring at the cold ashes. Now I understand. None of it was true. He never intended to marry me. He was afraid this baby would be born and ruin his career. He used me, and when he was done, he planned to leave me carrying all the blame alone. Noah's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, Defendant Claire's statement is pure speculation. I have proof. Claire cut him off. She reached into the sealed evidence bag that had been placed next to her. She pulled out her phone, the same phone the bailiffs had confiscated from her the day she was taken into custody. It was enclosed in a clear evidence pouch with a numbered tag. My complete text records are on this phone. Every message from January through June. Nothing has been deleted, including the message Noah sent me on February 3rd. It says, and I quote, "This thing has to die. If it does not die, I do." The gallery exploded into noise. The judge's gavel came down like a hammer. Order in order. Noah's face turned the color of a corpse. His lawyer's face did not look much better. She leaned sideways and whispered something into his ear. Noah did not respond. He stared straight ahead with hollow eyes. He looked like a machine whose power cord had been yanked out of the wall. I sat in the second row of the gallery. My hands were folded on my knee. Madeline leaned over and murmured next to me. That was beautiful. I did not answer. I was looking at the two defendants tearing each other apart across the well of the courtroom. I was thinking about a winter evening 8 months ago. I had warmed a cup of milk for Claire before leaving for my shift. I had believed my life was moving in the warmest possible direction. Noah had been right about one thing. The baby had to die. Not because his career would die if the baby lived. Because if the baby had lived, I would never have known. For 4 years, I had shared my bed with a woman whose heart was full of knives, and I never saw a single one of them until they were already buried in my back. After the second recording finished, Noah's defense system collapsed completely. Sat in the gallery and watched his lawyer rise again and again, trying to patch the damage. Each time, the prosecutor shoved her back down with hard evidence, the full chat logs, the cross-referenced timestamps from both recordings, the message on Claire's phone, "This thing has to die. If it does not die, I do." Each piece of evidence was a suture, and the prosecutor was stitching Noah and Claire together into the same fate. When Noah rose for his final statement, his voice was hoarse. He stood at the defense table. The top 2 buttons of his white shirt were undone. His tie hung crooked. His hair was damp with sweat and plastered to his forehead. The celebrated attending cardiologist from Cleveland Clinic was gone. The man standing in his place was a drowning victim clawing at the last piece of wreckage. Your Honor, I ask the court to consider something. I am a cardiac surgeon. I have practiced for 11 years. I have performed over 1,400 operations. I have saved more than 1,300 lives. I have made a contribution to society. I know what I did was wrong, but I am begging this court to give me a chance. Let me go back to the operating room. Let me spend the rest of my life atoning." His voice cracked on the final word. The prosecutor rose. In there was not a ripple in his tone. "The defendant Noah has told the court he saved 1,300 lives. The prosecution has no quarrel with his professional record. But he is not standing here today because of anything he did inside an operating room. He is standing here because outside the operating room he orchestrated a different kind of death. Those 1,300 patients he saved do not serve as a credit he can spend to reduce the sentence for the planned killing of his own unborn child." The prosecutor paused and added the final line, "The law does not accept that transaction." The judge announced a recess. The panel withdrew to deliberate. Eni walked out into the corridor and stood by the window. Late autumn in New York. The sky was high and pale. The ginkgo trees in the courtyard of the courthouse had turned half yellow. Leaves were scattered across the ground in a thin layer. The window was open a crack, and cold air leaked through. It felt good against my face. Madeline came out and stood next to me. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "No," I said. "You are a rare kind of client," she said. She pushed her glasses up. "You walk into a courtroom and look like you're waiting for a bus." "Occupational habit," I said. "The worse the moment gets, the steadier you have to be." She looked at me and did not say anything. 40 minutes later, the court was called back into session. Everyone rose. The judge held the verdict in her hands. Her reading glasses were perched on her nose. Her voice was slow and heavy. She read through a long section of factual findings. Then the legal analysis. Then she reached the sentence. Defendant Noah, convicted of criminal solicitation of murder for inciting the termination of a pregnancy. The court finds the circumstances especially severe. The defendant provided false evidence during trial and has demonstrated no genuine remorse. In sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Noah's body swayed. His lawyer reached out and grabbed his arm. He shook her off and stood rigid. His lips moved, but no sound came. Defendant Claire, convicted of criminal solicitation of murder. Inez, the biological mother of the fetus, acting under the incitement of the biological father Noah, she planned and prepared to terminate the pregnancy. She concealed the plan from her lawful spouse and falsified a divorce agreement in an attempt to cover up the crime. The court, however, takes into account that the defendant provided truthful testimony during the latter phase of the trial and submitted critical evidence. In sentence reduced accordingly. The court sentences the defendant to 15 years in prison. The gavel came down. The sound was sharp and clean, like a bone snapping. Claire collapsed against the defense table. In her knees hit the edge of the chair with a hollow thud. Then her whole body slid downward. Her dark blue blouse caught on the armrest and tore with a ripping sound. The bailiffs lunged forward to hold her up. She shoved their hands away and grabbed the railing of the defense table with both hands. Her knuckles went white as dead bone. "Ethan." She screamed my name. Every head in the courtroom turned to look at me. Eni was in the second row of the gallery, and my hands were in my pockets. My face held nothing at all. "Ethan, look at me." Her scream splintered. It was like a gong being struck and shattered at the same time. In-sharp pieces of sound flew in every direction. "Look at me. Eni, I'm begging you, just look at me." I looked at her. Her face was wrecked with tears. Her hair had come loose from its tie and was plastered in wet strands against her cheeks. Her eyes were locked onto mine, and there was no remorse inside them. In no guilt. Only fear. The fear of a person who has been thrown into the dark and is clawing for anything to hold on to. In that moment, I was the last rope she could see. But that rope had snapped 8 months ago, the night she lay next to me and whispered another man's name. "Bailiff," the judge said, removing her glasses. "Remove the defendants from the courtroom." 2 bailiffs grabbed Claire under the arms and pulled her up. She twisted and thrashed, turning her head back toward me across the entire length of the courtroom. "Ethan, Eni was wrong. I know I was wrong. Tell them I did not mean it. Ethan." Her voice trailed down the corridor in a long, fading tail of sound, in smaller and smaller. And then a metal door slammed shut, and the sound was cut off entirely. The courtroom fell quiet. People in the gallery started filing out. Some of them glanced at me as they passed. Some whispered to each other. One man clapped me on the shoulder and said something I did not catch. I nodded and gave a small smile to every single one, the same smile I give to a patient's family when I walk out of the OR and say the surgery went well. Madeline walked up to me. She had her briefcase in one hand. In behind her gold-rimmed glasses, her eyes held something I could not quite name. "It is over," she said. "It is over. What are you going to do now?" I thought about the question. Innie could not answer it. For 8 months, every single thing I did had been aimed at this one day. Concealing the voice recorder, drafting the divorce agreement, building the chain of evidence, walking into this courtroom, waiting for the verdict. I had poured all my energy and all my focus into this one campaign. I was like a surgeon who has been standing over an open chest for 8 hours, fully concentrated, blood loss controlled, incisions precise. And then the last suture is tied. The patient is stable in the ICU, and the surgeon realizes his own legs have gone completely numb. "Go back to the hospital," I said. "I have 3 surgeries scheduled next week." Madeline smiled. The smile brought out fine lines at the corners of her eyes. They were faint and shallow, like the crease on a page that has been gently folded. "Has anyone ever told you that you are a frightening person?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Someone told me that about 6 months ago." She did not ask who. It was Claire. The day she signed the divorce agreement. She had stood in the doorway and turned back to ask if I hated her. I said no, and she smiled. I understood that smile now. A man who gets cheated on and does not feel hate is either a saint or he is already holding the knife behind his back. Claire had guessed right. She just guessed too late. The final verdict was handed down on the day the first snow of winter fell over New York. The snow was not heavy. It melted the moment it hit the ground. The streets were wet and dark, like wounds that had been washed too many times. I walked out of the hospital with my white coat traded for a down jacket and a scarf wrapped twice around my neck. I was still cold. The front steps of New York Presbyterian were crowded with people waiting for rides. They all had their shoulders hunched and their collars up, and they stamped their feet and breathed clouds of white steam into the wind. My phone buzzed. "Madeline." "Ethan, are you free tonight?" "I am," I said. "There is a coffee shop in Williamsburg. It is called Blue Bottle, 8 o'clock. In my treat." "You're treating me?" "The case is closed. We should celebrate." I laughed once. A lawyer treating her client to a celebratory coffee was strange in any industry. But I said yes. Hung up and realized I had been standing on the hospital steps for 3 full minutes. Snow had collected on my shoulder. Blue Bottle Coffee was tucked down a quiet side street in Williamsburg. The storefront was small. Warm yellow light spilled out of the floor-to-ceiling windows and threw a patch of gold onto the snowy pavement. I pushed open the door, and Madeleine was already there. She had taken a seat by the window. A cup of Americano sat in front of her, and she was turning the pages of a book. She was not wearing her courtroom suit. She had on a camel coat over a cream-colored turtleneck. Her hair was not pinned up the way she usually wore it. It was down, falling past her shoulders. She was not wearing her glasses. Contacts, probably. I almost did not recognize her. "Ethan." She looked up, closed the book, and waved me over. I walked over and sat down. The barista came by, and I ordered a hot latte. Madeline pushed her book to the side of the table. The cover was face up. Being and Nothingness. Sartre. Raised an eyebrow. "You read this?" "Passes the time," she said. "When you practice law for a living, you eventually need to learn how to face nothingness. Any conclusions?" "None yet." She smiled and took a sip of her Americano. "What about you? The case is over. How does it feel?" The latte arrived. I wrapped both hands around the ceramic cup. The warmth seeped into my palms. Did not answer right away. 8 months, from June to January, from summer to winter. Had gone from being a man who thought he was the luckiest person in New York to a man who hid voice recorders in his own bedroom. Claire had been sentenced to 15 years. Noah had been given life without parole. I had gotten exactly the outcome I wanted. But the strange thing was I did not feel triumphant. It was not regret. It was not guilt. It was simply that the feeling I had expected, the feeling of victory, was not there. It feels like finishing a very long surgery, I said slowly. Before the operation you are anxious. During the operation you are completely focused. After the operation, all that is left is emptiness. Madeline looked at me. In there was a serious light in her eyes. Ethan, I have worked in family court for 8 years. I have seen more clients than I can count. You are the only one who walked into that courtroom and never shed a single tear. Never shouted a single curse, never lost control once. Are you complimenting me? I'm describing a pattern. She set down her coffee. People with your personality type are the most likely to break after the fact. Scalpels do not rust on the operating table. But people do. I did not say anything. Outside, the snow was picking up. The street lamp lit the falling flakes in a swirling column of white. The coffee shop was playing soft jazz. A woman's voice was singing in French. He could not understand the lyrics, but the melody was gentle. It moved like a river with a very slow current. I have a question I have wanted to ask you for a while, Madeline said. From our first meeting until today, you have never once passed judgment on Claire. Aside from stating the facts, you have never said a single thing like she wronged me. Why is that? I was quiet for a moment. There is a rule in the OR, I said. You do not open a patient's abdomen and then start cursing the tumor. The tumor is the tumor. Cursing it will not shrink it. It will only make your hands shake. Madeline heard this and looked down at her cup. She smiled. The smile was quick there and gone in a blink. But when it happened, her eyes curved briefly. It was like a thin crack spreading across the surface of ice. Ethan, she said. She used my name, not the professional address, just my name. When you talk like that, it makes me want to look after you. My hand stopped around the latte. It had been a very long time since anyone had used those words about me. Claire never had. She believed I was strong enough that I did not need looking after. Noah probably thought I was a joke. A man who got cheated on and still cooked dinner. Everyone in the general surgery department at New York Presbyterian thought of me as steady as a mountain. Mountains do not need anyone to look after them. But mountains get hollowed out too. I had simply never let anyone see the hollow places. What about you? I asked. 8 years as a family lawyer. You have seen every version of divorce, infidelity, asset theft, mutual destruction. How have you not lost all faith in people? Madeline tilted her head and thought about it. Because in every 100 cases, there are always 1 or 2 that are worth it, she said. Your case, for example, in a man who was lied to for 5 years. He did not lash out at the world. He did not self-destruct. He did not pick up a knife and go after anyone. He used lawful means to put 2 criminals in prison. Every step was calculated, and not a single step crossed the line. She lifted her coffee cup across the small round table. She held it up toward me. That is not revenge. That is justice. And justice is worth celebrating. I lifted my latte and touched my cup to hers. The click of ceramic on ceramic was very small. It was the sound of the first crack in winter ice. What are your plans for the spring? Madeline asked. The hospital, I said. I have a research project that has been sitting untouched for half a year. In a new batch of residents to train. 3 postponed surgeries still on the schedule. All work, she said. And you? I took a new case. Domestic violence plus concealment of assets. Goes to trial before the spring festival. Another war. I am used to it. Madeline set her cup aside and leaned back in her chair. The collar of her camel coat flipped up slightly. The line of her chin against it was striking. But I have been thinking about something lately. What is that? I have spent 8 years being everyone else's lawyer, cleaning up other people's disasters. Do not think I have ever really cleaned up my own life. For example, I live too far from my office. 2.5 hours of commuting every day. For example, I have a potted plant at home that I have not changed the water for in 6 months, and it is somehow still alive. For example, I have not been in a relationship in 3 years. She finished the sentence and looked at me. The look was direct, no evasion. No testing the waters. It was the same straightforward gaze a lawyer gives a piece of evidence. My hand paused on the latte again. Madeline, Are you making conversation or delivering a closing argument? She laughed. It was a real laugh this time. The fine lines around her eyes all came out. The corners of her mouth lifted, and she showed a neat row of teeth. She looked nothing like the cool, analytical family lawyer from the courtroom. She looked like a person who kills her houseplants, spends too much time on the train, and has not dated anyone in 3 years. Maybe both, she said. Outside, the snow was still falling, but lighter now. In a thin layer of white had collected on the ground beneath the street lamp. The jazz track in the coffee shop had changed to something slower, in still French. It sounded like someone talking to themselves in the middle of the night. Innie finished the last sip of my latte. The cup had gone cold. Madeline, I said. Innie used her full name. Next Wednesday night, the hospital is holding an end-of-year dinner. In food and drinks. Very boring. But after it ends, there is a very good noodle place near here. It stays open until 2 in the morning. She rested her chin on her hand and looked at me. Her eyes were bright. They had light in them, but the light was not sharp. Ethan, are you asking me out for noodles? Yes. And the coffee tonight? Inai said this one was my treat. The noodles are on me, I said. Deal. She stood up and pulled on her coat and scarf. She slid being and nothingness into her bag. We walked out of the coffee shop together and stood on the sidewalk in the falling snow. She looked down at her phone and ordered a ride. Inai stood next to her and watched the snow land in her hair and on her shoulders and on the streets of this city in the deep hours of a November night. 8 months ago, I believed my life was a perfect circle. 8 months later, I understood that the circle had been a wall. The wall had collapsed. Inai was standing in the rubble and beyond the rubble. The world was much larger than I had ever allowed myself to see. The snow kept falling. Inai held out my hand and let a single flake land in my palm. In it melted into a drop of water, very cold at first. Then it warmed. My ride is here, Madeline said. All right, Ethan.
Yes?
See you Wednesday. She pulled open the car door and looked back at me. The snowlight caught her face. Her eyes were very clear. Tell them to make the noodles spicy, she said. Inai stood by the curb and watched the taillights of her car disappear at the end of the street. The red glow blinked once in the curtain of snow and then merged into the lights of the city. The wind was strong, but I did not feel cold. Inai put my hands into the pockets of my down jacket and turned to walk home. Something in the pocket pressed against the back of my hand. It was the baby shoe, off-white, in soft leather, in size 2. In small enough to fit in my palm. For the first time in 8 months, I took it out and held it in my hand. Then I put it back in my pocket. Inai was not forgetting it. Inai was taking it with me, and I was walking forward,